Hello, guys. I am thrilled to share this week's episode with you. We are so grateful to have the guest, Dr. Harrison Scott Key. He is a brilliant writer, hilarious, and yet so deeply profound with his moving book, How to Stay Married, the Most Insane Love Story Ever Told. I am so grateful. He has laid his cards out. He is sharing this huge story of his own struggles, his wife's infidelity, how they repaired, how to really wake up a marriage. I love the way you'll hear him describe it as a marriage murder mystery almost. The marriage is killed. Can it be revived? I was all ears when I first heard about this book because I heard about it from a dear friend, editor Ariel Curry. And then I could not put it down. And I realized, okay, this is why this book skyrocketed past all other books last year, including mine. And I was so thrilled when I found out why. This book goes vulnerably to places we need. Frankly, in this culture where marriages are on the line, and this is the number one issue for marriage, we needed to have him share this wisdom with us in this book and right now in this episode. So thank you for being brave to press play. Thank you for being here with us. It is fun too, I promise. We're going to throw some wit your way. I think he has some very seven wing eight vibes and also the great three performer gift. So we're going to get to just enjoy that too. But really today, I hope that you bring yourself to this episode. If it's triggering for you in any way, take a deep breath, a pause, and come back to it. This is a worthy time to learn with us. And also he's an amazing storyteller. So I'm excited for you. Thank you so much for joining. And perhaps best of all, the timing for this episode is if you're listening live June 2024, his book is now out also in paperback. I heard it on audio. It was hardcover. Now we get paperback. I'm so grateful. So thank you so much for tuning in. Let's talk to Harrison. Harrison, thank you so much for joining us on the Enneagram and Marriage Pod today.
I am so excited to talk to anybody who can tell me things about the Enneagram. I know nothing.
Oh my gosh, you are going to have so much fun, I hope, with us today. Do you know your types at all?
I don't. I have no idea.
Oh my goodness, I had all these guesses when I was reading your book, and we
Oh,
can.
you can tell. You could probably tell me what I am. I mean, if you had to ask, I would say I'm. I have no idea. I don't. People have told. I think I've been told that I am at least four of them.
Okay.
And it's like yeah, I have no idea. You have to tell me. If you've read my
Yeah.
books, you can tell me
Yes.
what I am.
Well, I think here's the thing about it. Sometimes we look like another type on the outside because we can hide, but you are very vulnerable. So I'm going to go for it. I think you might be a seven. There's another possibility of you being a four. And I would put three in there as well. And if there's nine numbers and I had this little bit of like, I could wing it, we call it in the Enneagram, I might say seven wing eight because you do have a lot of power and eights are powerful, but that seven is very jovial and can hide behind the anger. And then the three and the four are performer and artist. So, of course, your depth and the way you plunge in your books, I think that four artist is in there somewhere too. So, those are
Which
my
one?
couple guesses.
Which one is the hot one? I want to be that one.
We'll go with seven because that's my
Okay.
type. So
Okay. No, that's good. That's fair. I can respect
oh
that.
my gosh, you guys, you're listening to two potential sevens talking here. So you know we have to go there. But of course, if you're listening, your type is the hot type. And his wife is the hot type because we have officially seen her beautiful pictures. And we're going to talk about your marriage and your beautiful wife too. Um, so thank you for coming on. My voice is a little raspy today. We were talking before we got on. It's Maycember. We have come off of a lot of big things. Can you tell us a little bit about your family and all you guys have going on?
Oh, yeah. Well, May's tough, not just because we have three kids who
Yes.
are involved in a lot of extracurriculars, but
Yes.
we also have a graduating senior
Oh,
graduating from high school.
yes.
So that's like they just have so much going on. And then I work at a university, and
Mhm.
so we are all sort of locked into all of our big spring stuff right now too. Let's see.
Mhm.
We have had to have a like day by day calendar on the dry erase board on the fridge just so everybody knows what's going on.
Mhm.
So let's say just in the like last night, we had the middle school, high school choir recital, which 2 of my daughters were singing in, and then
Mm.
my middle child had a guitar solo in that, event, so that was a big deal, and then I, for some reason, signed up to play the drums with the
Oh my
choir.
gosh.
So, it's fun to play with when the girls are singing, and, but I
Aw.
don't know why I did that, and then, let's see, we've got our school has rock ceremonies, so at the end of every year, the teachers of each class present a character rock to the students, like
Mhm.
enthusiasm or valor or whatever.
Mm.
And so those have been happening. So but that's like 30 minutes. You have to like leave work, drive to school, go for this 30-minute thing. If you want to be present, if you want to be like a halfway decent parent, and you can't
Yes.
do that, and then you go back to work. And see, we've got volleyball practices. We have this Saturday, we have on Friday night, we have a baccalaureate, which is a sort of pre-graduation ceremony. And then on Saturday morning, we have graduation. And then Saturday afternoon, we have a dance recital. And then Saturday night, we have a big party for our graduate. And that's just one day. And our heads are falling off
Oh
with
gosh.
joy and exhaustion.
Yes, you named it well. You guys are doing it so well, but you're just tired and you are just, I mean, all the big emotions this week, I'm sure, especially because of graduation. Is this your first or second graduate?
This is our first. We have three
Oh,
girls who are
yes.
13, 15, and 17. And so the
Mm.
first graduate this time. And
Yeah.
she just did her big senior thesis presentation, which was really awesome. Like they write a big paper and then they defend it in front of a big group, and the parents all come. And we try not to be the, lawnmower parents, the helicopter parents. We support what our girls want to do,
Yeah.
even when it's weird. Or we don't let them do travel sports because
Mm.
that's just I have to write books at some point. I have to
Yes.
pay the bills somehow.
Yes.
But we love to cheer them on, and it's awesome to watch them becoming really awesome young ladies.
That is beautiful and such a tribute to you guys doing a great job too. And they're amazing girls from what I've read in your book and what you've just shared. So thank you for just sharing them with us now. We can celebrate with you. This is so exciting and also sad. So, and I know because I graduated one last year, one next year, and then one to go. So I'm right there with you. Um, but I'm just so touched you spent some time with us because, as you know, I've been researching couples for many years now, and this book really just touched my heart. And that's why I reached out to you several months back. So thank you so much for being here with us. I did not Enneagram type your wife officially, but I had my feelings and thoughts about her being possibly an improver type one or a heart type two giver because I saw both of those traits in her. How would you describe her to our audience?
She is an amazing person. We
Mhm.
are so different. What we
Yeah.
do share in common is a sense of humor. We love to laugh, and we love to to make fun of each other and our children and the rest of the world, and our children in turn make fun of us. But we're very much a laughing family.
Mm,
And you know, it's, Lauren is she is I've just learned so much from her,
mm,
especially about parenting. She is so locked in. She's had the title director of operations in like several different jobs, and that's a good description of her. She can solve complicated puzzles very quickly
mm.
about
Wow.
what needs to happen and when, and just watching her at work. Whereas I'm just kind of floating in the clouds, dreaming up some new thing I want to do. I want to start a new band or whatever. She's like locked into the details, and she's so good at it. She's so patient with our
Mm,
girls.
mm,
You see a lot of I write memoirs and I teach that. And when people write, one thing I've noticed that, and this isn't true across the board,
mhm,
but when men write memoirs, they tend to be about their fathers,
mhm.
and they tend to be about pursuing their fathers and understanding, trying to connect with them because fathers can be distant,
Yeah,
as a rule, culturally.
yeah.
Even the ones that are good and awesome, they can still be kind of emotionally distant. And when women write memoirs, they tend to be about their mothers, and they tend to be about escaping their mothers.
Mm,
And so it's a fascinating sort of
yeah.
contrast of opposites there. And so in observing my wife with my children, she's not smothering in the way that so many parents can be who are
Mm,
caregivers. She's not smothering but she is so ferociously in their corner,
Mm,
and she doesn't try to be their friend, but she's friends with them. It's really sweet to see it happen. She maintains some,
mhm.
she's wiser and older and an authority figure to our girls, and they so
Yeah.
desperately look up to her.
Oh, yes.
And but she's really good at making them independent and encouraging them to, like, forcing them to learn how to drive,
Mm,
when they don't want to. So many kids today don't wanna learn how to drive, and
yeah.
so she's very strong and independent, um,
Mm.
and yet, just a terrific caregiver. She she's insane, she's out of her mind about, quite a lot, as she and I both are, uh, like, we had, one of our daughters, her bed got bed bugs in it, and probably she was traveling with some friends, and they stayed at some hotels and
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah.
You would have thought our house had been attacked by zombies, like, the way Lauren acted. She was freaking out, and, like, she bought, like, a entire case of, like, bed bug bombs, and we're, like, going up there, and we're, like, basically torching the entire upstairs with a blowtorch.
That's
She just,
awesome.
like, it's just so funny to watch both of us, like, have our own sort of manias
Yes.
and to give each other some grace in that. So I can be completely obsessive and passionate about the things that bother me, that I care about. But I'd be sitting outside writing, and she would text me like, "I think we need to let off another bed bug bomb." I'm like, "If you want
Oh,
to, baby, that's fine. We will strip the wallpaper
oh,
off if you want, and completely remove the top half of the house if you want. That's fine."
oh.
She's amazing, and she's more than anything, she's just incredibly funny, and,
Mhm.
it means a lot to be married to a funny person because it makes dinner time and cooking and everything else more fun.
Oh my gosh, I love that raving review. I love the narrative of your marriage and how you said we're both crazy and insane in different ways, which we know research tells us that is what makes a marriage is we make each other slightly less crazy. But you've just added to the narrative that we can also continue on marriage memoirs where we just talk about how we make each other crazy. We accept each other as crazy as well. So I love that. And you are just helping us all to see, yes, that inner improver in her. There's also sounds like some type 5 in terms of the systemic organizing and wit. So she's probably got many different of the top traits of each of these types. But I'm so glad you guys have found your way. And as we're all being honest here, constantly real on this podcast, we are still finding our way. And you are so real about that in your book. And one of the reasons I found your book was because I wrote a marriage book last year, The Enneagram in Marriage, and I was reading the charts in a way that I normally don't because I was like, how's my book doing? And guess his book kept beating mine way higher than mine at the top. Yours.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that.
No, it was so good because, of course, this is my field. I'm always like, "What are the best marriage books?"
Yeah.
But I was, like, really on it right then, and everyone was blogging about it, so I had to read it, and I was like, "Oh," and I'm like, "Oh, oh." Like, here I thought I was being a little bit vulnerable, and I'm like, you earned this. This was such a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story that you're sharing with us. I'm just honored to have you, and I wanna give you that, like, you earned it and then some. So tell us a little bit about your book and a bit about how the topic found you, because I know it was a hard journey and it's very brave.
Well, thank you. So I'll tell you about the book. Let me. I'll start a little bit before that. So I'm a writer. I've written just tons and tons of essays and articles and for magazines and websites, and I've been doing that for about 15 years now. I published my first, and but everything I write is autobiographical. I mean, you could call it memoir. It's somewhere
Mhm.
between memoir and David Sedaris books. I write about my life,
Yeah.
but I also kind of rove across the terrain of American culture. Uh,
Mhm. An award
Nevertheless,
winning.
yeah,
Yes,
thank you. So
yes.
the first two books were classified as memoirs. They could just
Mm,
as easily have been called books of essays. So
mm,
I've written a lot about my life. And the first book came out in 2015. It's called The World's Largest Man. That was really about my father growing up in the South.
yeah.
The second book was called Congratulations, Who Are You Again? And that was really about the American dream and
Mhm.
ambition and family. And
Mm,
so I had been writing these books,
mhm,
and promoting these books and going on these, big national book tours and whatnot. And a little bit after my second book came out, I found out that, I didn't find out. My wife told me that she
mhm.
wanted a divorce. She was in love with a man who used to be our neighbor.
Yeah.
And that was obviously a wild thing to hear. I mean, just jaw dropping, heart stopping to hear.
Yeah.
Not just because I'm generally a funny, lighthearted guy. And had written about, and I had spent so much time writing about my family, trying to understand sort of who I was, who were they,
Yeah.
what did all this mean? I've only been who I am. I've only been one
Yeah.
person.
Right.
And so I chose to write nonfiction because I'm so fascinated by just life and all the kind of wild things that can happen to you. And so it
Mhm.
was a huge shock because I'd spent so much time investigating my own life and my own family and trying to understand my wife, myself, my children, my marriage. And so to hear this news was so wild, because I really thought, it's like when a doctor, uh, finds out he's got cancer and he's
Yeah.
shocked because
Right.
he's been, doing this work and all of a sudden this is
Mhm.
happening to him.
Yeah.
So at the time, so when I found this out, I had no intention at all of writing a book, turning this into a book at all. This was too sort of life upending to consider that. And it that was in, I don't know, about six-ish years ago, 6 or 7 years ago when that happened.
Mhm.
And it was incredibly traumatic, and it all happened very fast.
Yeah.
And I won't spoil sort of the narrative for readers
Yeah.
or listeners who haven't read it, but we
Mhm.
reconciled very quickly after that. I think it was sort of like it was just we were all in shock. And so my wife Lauren broke it off with this guy who had been my friend. This guy had used to live next to us, and like this
Mhm.
is the guy, drank beer with in the front
Yeah.
yard and talked
Yeah.
about football with and all that.
Yeah.
It was just the
Oh.
most
Mm.
at least interesting person. Like I was
Yeah.
I couldn't decide if
Yeah.
it would hurt my feelings more if my wife would, like leave me for like like incredibly wealthy, good-looking guy, or this guy who was none of those things. And
Right.
I say all this in the book, so this is not a
Yes.
revelation to
Yes.
anybody. It was this that was really awful. Um,
Yeah.
it would have been so much better if she just left me for Superman, but this guy. And I think she was shocked that I didn't. She thought I was going to move out,
Mm.
and I'm like, I'm not moving out. This I
Right.
maybe that's what men do where you come from, but on my
Yeah.
planet,
Yeah.
men stay with their families. So I'm here, and
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that shocked her so much that she kind of didn't know what to do. And I didn't do that out of any sort of like a heroic move. That was just what I did.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
thought, I'm not leaving my children, and
Right.
like I'm definitely not leaving if this guy's going to move right in here. Like this is my home.
Yes.
And so I became fiercely protective of my family at that point, and I told her I wasn't leaving. She said, "Well, I'm not leaving."
Mm.
And then, bing bang bong, like a month later, she broke it off with this guy. And we were, of
Mm.
course, sleeping in separate beds, and we
Yeah.
weren't like having a happy marriage at that point. But she
Yeah.
broke it off with this guy, and we reconciled. We tried therapy, but I was less interested in doing the work that I had been doing for a long time, which is reflection and introspection.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to move on. I wanted to
Mhm.
patch it up, sweep it under the rug, and move on. And I think she did too.
Mhm.
And it won't be a surprise to anyone listening that that did not work. That when you discover a great big lump in your armpit, you might want to really get it looked at. When you
Yeah.
discover a great big lump in your marriage, you can't just wish it
Mhm.
away. And
Yeah.
so, about 2 or 3 years later, she came back to me with the very same news. She was back with this
Mhm.
guy.
Yeah.
And and then all hell
Mhm.
broke loose at that point because I knew that sweeping things under the rug wouldn't work, and I think she knew that too. I won't give away too much, but she moved out. I became a single father with three small children at home,
Yeah.
and I started writing letters to her trying to understand what had happened to us, what I had done to her, what she had done to me.
Mhm.
I immediately got into therapy, and my therapist never want to read my books, and I'm always like, "You really should just read my books. You'll understand me so much better." And they like kind of roll their eyes, like, "Yeah, whatever. Like, I want the real you." I'm like, "Girl, you don't understand. The
This
book is
is
so
me.
real."
Yes, it is.
So my therapist was like, "Have you tried writing about these experiences?" I was like, "Would you not are you not
Yeah,
listening to me? I
yeah.
write books." So, but she was right. I started writing these almost like a blog to myself. It was totally private. And sometimes they were letters to my wife, handwritten. Sometimes I was just taking notes about sort of processing what I was going through in real time,
Yeah,
almost like a war reporter, just like
yeah,
a diary of like being in a
yeah,
war.
the trauma.
Um, and a few months into this nightmare, because it was still a nightmare, we were still married. She was not living here. It was possible she was living with this guy, not too far away from our
Yeah,
house.
yeah,
It was possible he was coming into my home. I mean, it was really awful. Um, I kept writing and kept, trying to keep my house together. And a lot of very dramatic things happened that I won't spoil.
yeah,
But
yeah.
after a few months, I got a call from my wife, and everything changed at that point. And so she eventually came home, and I sat there looking at all of these notes and all of these letters that I'd never given to her because she was living with another man down the street.
Yeah,
And I thought, I have what I did before was sweep this under the rug, and terrible, terrible things happened. So
yeah,
maybe I should go the other way now. Maybe I should ask my wife if she would be interested in us telling this story,
yeah,
like really telling it. Nothing salacious, nothing that would scandalize my children when they read this book in 5 or
yeah,
10 or 20 years, but
yeah.
something that might scandalize people who sweep things under the rug. And the
Mhm.
truth is, in every marriage, it's so hard, and it's varying levels of hard, and there are varying levels of things swept under the rug. And
Right.
you forgive a lot. Forgive a lot of bad things in your spouse when you're married. You have to do that to survive. But I felt like nobody told me this would happen. So
Mm,
maybe we could write a book that would somehow tell people
yeah.
what we wished we had known.
Mm,
And if we could do it in a way that shocked people, not because of what happened in the story, the infidelity and adultery and the secrets and the lies and the cruelty, and that's on my part, not just my wife. I'm speaking about myself.
yeah,
Not that would shock, not just with that, but would shock with something more surprising that might shock with laughter. If
yeah.
we could make people laugh about this terrible thing, and it's easy to laugh because it happens to somebody else,
Yes,
not
yes, yes.
as the great comedian, what's his name, the Mel Brooks says,
Mm.
tragedy is when I get a paper cut. Comedy is when you fall into a manhole and die. Um, and so I thought, if we can
Oh
make this
my god.
funny and emotional, and profound
Mhm.
and full of kind of unexpected laughter, maybe this would get through to some folks. It wouldn't be some kind of sentimental, surfacey marriage memoir. And so I said, and I'll end my answer with this. So about 2 months after Lauren came home, things were very delicate, as you can imagine.
Yeah,
Two affairs with the same person,
yeah,
separation. Both of us had so much PTSD.
yes.
She was dealing with trauma that went back to her childhood that
Mm,
came out through all of this, like
yeah,
very deep and tangled webs of trauma related
yeah.
to her mother's death, her father's leaving her. So we
Mm,
both had a lot of PTSD, and I was like, "You
yeah,
want to write a book?" And
yeah,
she was
yeah,
like, "Hell no, I have
yeah.
no interest." She was like, "Why don't," and she got so mad. She said, "Can't you just write a book about the dog?" She was like, "People love books about dogs."
Oh,
We have a dog who's a bit of a scene stealer in the book. His name is Gary,
yeah.
and he's actually outside my door right now.
Oh, I'm
Desperately wants to
sorry.
get in here. He's a 100-pound chocolate lab. She's like, "Can
Oh,
you please just write a dog about him? People would love that. We've become
yeah,
millionaires." And I was
yeah,
like, I was like, "You're right. You're right. It's too soon. No books. Don't worry."
yeah.
So I commenced to then write this book and just not tell her about it.
Yeah.
and because that's what I do. I'm a writer, and I was like, well,
Yeah.
I guess I'm supposed to write this marriage book now. So I finished the manuscript. It took about a year. And this manuscript goes back and forth in the past. It goes everywhere from our wedding day 20 some years ago to these events that had just happened in our lives. And I gave her the book and I was like, hey, you remember when we talked about writing a book about this? And you were like, no way. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, I did write the book,
Yeah.
but if you don't like it, I will burn it. Nobody will ever see it. And I gave it to her and she read it in a day and she came back and she said, I'm shocked. And I was like, what are you shocked about? She goes, it's really funny. I was really surprised. I thought it would be so like mean and hateful or resentful or something. And she said, it's only missing one thing. I would like to write a chapter two. And I had been begging her to write something for one of my books for years. And then she wrote her chapter, and that's
Oh,
easily the most beautiful chapter in the
oh,
book. It's so,
yes.
ugh, it's just like gut wrenching.
Got
It
it.
will make you cry about 15 different times.
Yep. Mhm.
Um, and that's how the book came about. So
Oh,
it's really a murder and mystery
oh,
investigation. Who
yeah.
killed this marriage? At the
Yeah.
beginning of the book, the marriage dies, and I set myself up to find out who killed it. Is it really dead? Can it come back to life? And that's the story.
Oh my gosh, and yet it's not a fiction, it's real, and that's why we all fell in love with it because it's so real and raw and yet so relatable because everybody, as you said, has their demons. And as you say, I love your TED talk on it too. You talk about the monster in each of us and how we really have to become acquainted with our own self. This podcast audience, friends of mine here, community, feel and often hear me say that we all have that fundamental attribution error. Like, I'm a little bit better, I'm a little bit healthier. And what you guys peeked into, and I think why the book is so beautiful is you just named it. You're like, it was me too. And you said your therapist was helpful in that way too, to say this narrative started before you guys. It started within your marriage. This other guy really doesn't have that much to do with it. Thanks. We can claim your ego gets to go back in its place since he was kind of like boring and things. But I think that's really like why we all needed this book so desperately. Not only that, there's at least 25% of couples cheating. We know so much more. There's so many people who are on Ashley Madison sites and such that don't even report it. So tell us a little bit about maybe some of the red flags that you wish or you would and now tell people, hey, look out for this. I missed this. It was right under my nose.
Yeah. Um, well, I'm one of my qualities that is a blessing and a curse is I'm pretty trusting. I'm a very trusting person.
Mm,
Um, that makes me sound too nice. It's not like
mm,
I'm not trusting like naive is a better word.
yeah,
I'm very trusting but naive. I can be very
yeah,
naive.
yeah,
I'm always, I've got my things that I'm working on, my whether it's, playing in a band or what I'm cooking that night. Like I'm just so focused on whatever I'm doing. It's very easy to pull the wool over my eyes.
mhm,
Um, and I think so that's probably the biggest lesson I learned was it wasn't so much that my wife was really working hard to deceive me. It was also that I was kind of checked out. And so it was pretty easy to deceive. It's pretty easy to
mhm.
deceive somebody who's checked out.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so looking back, I would say when I mean, that's a great question because I have done about 5,000 podcast interviews and nobody's ever asked me that question
Oh,
about red flags. So you win the chicken dinner. Um, I would say some obvious ones at first, like when your spouse, is on a short errand for 4 hours. That's one.
yeah.
Um, you don't have to be checked out to know, like, I thought you were just like, gonna return something to the store. I didn't realize you were where are you, Um, when I found that she would never leave
Mm,
a computer or a phone anywhere near me when she left the room. Like she would leave the room and then come back and grab the phone and then leave again, like, she was expecting an important call.
yeah.
Um, and I noticed myself like very subtly before I even knew anything was happening. I noticed myself like there was one day where she was in the shower
Yeah.
and I was in some other room. I came in the bedroom, but her
Mm,
phone was on the bed, and I didn't think, oh, I should check her phone to see if she's cheating. I did not. That was not my thought
yeah.
at all. It was more like, oh,
Yeah.
that's weird. She never does that.
Mm.
Like, and then I picked the phone up, and then I felt somehow wrong for holding the phone. Like, why am I was like, am I you
Yeah.
hear about these spouses who like check up on their, they're just like kind of stalking their spouse because they're like, who are you talking to? Who are you texting?
Yeah.
And I was like, am I that person now? I was like, this is weird. So that was clearly my unconscious was telling me like, hey man, like this
Mhm.
is you're noticing something new now.
Yeah.
So I looked at it and I was like, and she's always had this one password. And I was like, well, she's in the shower. I can at least look. I mean, maybe, and of course, I felt so
Yeah.
guilty looking. I was
Yes.
like, I don't want to
Yes.
be this guy. I do not want to be this guy.
Yeah.
But so I entered her password and it didn't work. Her like
Mhm.
classic password that she's
Yeah.
had for years. And I was like, ooh. Then like the little, still small voices have started to kind of cry out a little bit. And I like
Mhm.
threw the phone back on the bed like it was a
Yeah.
snake. I was like, ooh, this is bad. I don't want to think about this. So little things like that, like noticing,
Mhm.
this is something anybody can find from Googling, but looking back, I also found it to be true in my marriage. When a sudden change of behavior, like Lauren started doing her hair differently, and that's not unusual. I mean, a lot of people do that, but that at the same time that she started working out at the gym, which she has never done in her entire
Mhm.
life, and it
Yeah.
just seemed like a huge change without much explanation. And at the time, I was like, "You want to work out? That's
Yeah.
great, go for it." But looking back, I can see like her changing her hair, her changing her buying new clothes, and
Yeah.
then working out, and all happened kind of at the same time. Like if I did that, I'm so transparent. Like I should hide more things. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't hide anything. If I was about to start working out, I would announce this to my family at dinner like I was, the king of, the seven kingdoms. I would have
Yeah.
like, I have decided I need to do this. What do you
Yeah.
guys think? But like all
Yeah.
these things, she did all these things kind of in sequence. And
Mm.
and looking back, it definitely was a huge red flag. Sometimes they were very small, like she came home from one of her errands, and she's as I mentioned earlier, she's all has always been such a present, active, engaged mom,
Yeah.
who will go above and beyond for the girls. If
Mhm.
that means taking them to some friend's house for a sleepover, even if it's an hour away, like I wouldn't do that. Like an hour
Yeah.
away, that
Yeah.
no, that's like a vacation.
Yeah.
I'm not doing
Yeah.
that. But she would do that, and then all of a sudden, in this period when the worst was happening, she would often um leave the girls with me and kind of go on these, errand escapades around town. And she had never done that before. At
Yeah.
the time, I was like, I mean, you put in the years, lady. If you want to go be by yourself and run some errands and get a iced
Yeah.
coffee, go for it. Like I was just so
Mhm.
naive about it. I didn't ask any questions. But there was one of these days where she came home from running some errands, and it was a Sunday, and she came home after about 4 hours gone, and it was we'd gone to church and then eaten lunch, and then she left. And there were two things I noticed that day. One is she loves to take a good, awesome, long Sunday nap, and she always has. And she had just stopped taking Sunday naps, just like out of the blue, randomly.
Yeah.
Again, by itself, that's just like a small thing, but in concert with all these other big changes, all these signs were there. And so I thought that was weird. So I'm laying down for a Sunday nap. I'm reading a little bit, but it was kind of lonely. Like my wife has always been
Yeah.
there, for us to nap for an hour or so together on a Sunday afternoon, and she wasn't there, and that felt a little strange. And then she came home, and this happened several times, and she looked like she was going out to dinner with like her best friends, like girls'
Yeah.
night. And this was just like a random Sunday afternoon at like 5 p.m. And she came home from the errands with
Yeah.
fresh lipstick. Her hair looked like it had just been done. And that
Yeah.
was just like, that's weird. Like, is she going somewhere later? So little small things like that.
Yeah.
Nothing, no huge red flags beyond just small stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
We have we were all working kind of remote at the time. Um, and I don't check up on my wife. At least I didn't. We at her insistence, we got the Life 360 app
Yeah.
after all this happened. And of course our girls were getting
Now the
phones
age
at the
is
time.
that we do it too. This is a great age for it.
And but she did sit me down after she came home, and we both sort of agreed, like, all right, we're going to try to be married. We're going to get some serious therapy. We're going to see if we can work through this.
Yeah.
And one day I did not ask her for this because I knew that that would it had to be her decision, but she wrote on a piece of paper all of her passwords, and
Oh,
she slid them across the table, and she was
oh,
like, "I have to do this." She's like, "I'm secretive. I've always been secretive.
yeah,
Most people don't know that about me."
right.
She goes, "But it is really like, I would give you my passwords. I would text you
Yeah,
my bank account
yeah,
numbers
yeah,
right now. I just don't care."
yeah,
And so that was a big move for her. So there was a lot of just
yeah,
small things, but she wasn't, a master, I mean, she told me later, I was like, this is weird. This may sound weird and kind of a weird fetish. I was like, but I really want to know like how you pulled this off.
right, right.
And where did you go? Where did you go? Where did you meet? Where did you go for sex in the car? Did you have sex every time you met up?
Yeah,
And like sometimes we would like once we went to this park that we had never, it was a marina actually, and we had never gone to this marina. I live in Savannah, Georgia, so we're on the ocean and lots of
yeah,
rivers and stuff. And we went to this marina, and I have never been to this place, and it's very close to my house
yeah,
and I'd never been there. And I just got this weird feeling when we were there. And I was like, and you hate to bring this stuff up after
yeah,
you're talking about it in therapy like every other day and you're trying to heal. It's so hard to bring stuff up after you've
yeah,
gone through something like this because it sounds like you haven't healed. It sounds like you still hold resentment. But we were sitting in this marina and the girls got out to like go to the playground or walk out on the dock. And she and I were sitting there and I was like, "Did you come here with him?" And she was like, "Yep." And it
oh,
was like I just knew. It was like something.
yeah,
So I asked her to tell me about all those places, and I drove, and when she told me where, I would drive to all of them just to be like, "All right, this is real. This is a thing
yeah,
that happened here." It was like I had to kind of make it
yeah,
real to myself.
mm,
So yeah, man, it's weird because when you talk about infidelity in marriage, most people in interviews like this or in
yeah,
therapy, they want to talk about like the real high level stuff like
yeah,
forgiveness and trust and all these things, love and commitment. But when you go through something like this, it's just as important and fascinating to talk about the really nitty gritty details of how something like this happened. How did I miss it? What did you do? Like, was I a fool not to see it? And I asked her that. I was like, was I a fool? Was I an absolute fool? And she was like, nope. She was like, "You were why would you think I was doing this? We were married, we had 3
right,
children, everything was happy. You have a job and you
yeah,
were doing this and that, and I was sneaky as hell." And she
right,
was like, "So it's
right,
not you." Like, she was like, it was
yeah,
me." Like, I and so we learned, you learn so much
yeah,
about your partner if there's one stat that couples, who what's the set? Couples who have gone through adultery, um, and stay together
yeah,
are more likely to it's
yeah,
something it's a counterintuitive stat about
yeah,
how when you go through infidelity, it forces so much vulnerability on both of
mhm,
you if you stay in the marriage.
right,
You can't always stay in the marriage.
right,
There's so many good reasons. And some people would have read my book and they're like, they thought I was saying like all divorce was bad. I am not saying that at all.
no, right,
But so there are plenty of good reasons to get divorced, and so many couples need to. And we have many, many good friends who are going through that right now,
yeah,
and
yeah,
walking with them through that, and that's been really hard. But
yeah,
some marriages don't make it, and sometimes that's the best call for a
yeah,
marriage. But
yeah,
if you can stay together through something like this, it forces you to show every card you have,
yeah.
both in therapy, but also on date night when you're sitting in the driveway or on the porch together. Like I see my wife so much more completely than I ever would have seen her had this not happened.
Right. And there is something terrible and beautiful about that, that you're naming that I don't think most people have your gift to be able to name. They've walked through it. There's so many who have, but it's like this blessing and curse for you to have had this gift to be able to analyze like this as well as this tragedy because it's shaping for other people how they're going to walk through it. And I know that because my audience is, going to do that. And then that's why I asked you on because you do it very well. And you're very raw about it. And so, thank you for sharing these red flags. And we all know that one of them alone is not what you're talking about. And each marriage will have its own. But you're just saying, like, this is the journey. And I've been walking with couples with this for 20 years. And there are triggers. And sometimes people need to sell the boat, move, quit the job. There's all kinds of different transitions couples will go through. But what you're saying is allow for it to be real and be present with it. And that's what you're saying also as you allowed yourself to see with your personality. And that's why I kind of thought 4 or 7, both of them are idealists. One of them is very deep. Like I know with your book with your father, it's like you are deep and soulful and a bit opposite of him in some ways, but yet I think sometimes the people who are deep and soulful get caught in melancholic thoughts and in their dreams and in their ideals too, but they don't always actually process the emotions beneath. And then also in terms of like the type 7 enthusiast doing it all, the epicure, you're experiencing life on all these levels and grand cooking plans and, all these fun things and playing this instrument and writing that book and doing that talk. Um, you're just saying like it could be very easy to keep moving and to not see. And I think we even as an audience, we resonate when you say there were things that I had a little check in my spirit about that I didn't always check into. And even that just helps me to be more vigilant. Like these are important things, but sometimes there's different issues going on underneath. I'm not worth it. I'm scared to find out, like so many things. And what
Mhm.
you're, I think, helping us to do here in this podcast is just say, be real. If you have a check in your spirit, check it out. Is that right?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, and I would if I could, like, briefly, in a way, kind of reframe this for people who
Yeah.
are listening,
Yeah.
it's not like you are a sentinel on the castle walls looking for some way that your spouse is going to completely F your marriage.
Right.
When we say red flags, that's
Yeah.
kinda what it feels like, like we're
Yeah.
waiting, like we're searching for
Right.
something terrible. It's
Right.
more I can say that what what you really if you wanna really spot the red flags, what you need to be doing is not looking for red flags at all, you need to be looking for your spouse and pursuing
Yeah.
them. If you pursue your spouse, you
Mm.
will see so many things that you did not see before. And ultimately, I think that is one thing that contributed to our staying married and contributed to my wanting to stay married, and
Mm.
it contributed to my finding out the truth before my wife actually wanted to tell me. The second time this affair happened, things were off. There were so many things that were weird, and it was during the pandemic, so things were
Yes.
reality had kind of tilted a little bit
Yes. Yes.
already for everybody on the planet.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, but things were weird, and I was starting to pick up something. I had way more EQ than I did the first time around, and I
Mhm.
wasn't as suspicious in a mean, like bitter way. I was just also have 3 daughters. You have to cultivate your EQ if you got
Yes,
3 daughters. And
you
so I was picking up on, and this is not language I would have used 5 years ago, but I was
do.
picking up on weird vibrations. And I
Yes, I
thought
get that.
I could confront my wife.
Yeah.
I was like, but maybe I should just pursue her, like
Mm.
invite her out on a date, see how
Mm.
she's doing, try to be intimate with her or hold her hand. Like
Yeah.
that to
Yeah.
me, that was the real key to sort of
Mm.
starting to sort of tear down the brick wall between
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Even though I found out some terrible things on the other side of that brick wall,
Yes.
pursuing my spouse is like now we're so tuned into each other that
Mm.
if she started to pull away, I would notice.
Feel
I
it.
would notice it in a way I
Yes.
never would have noticed it
Yes,
before.
you named it.
You know?
Mm. Mhm. This is exactly it, and you're writing a positive script in a different way too, whereas before it was like, "Hey, we hit middle marriage and the honeymoon is over. We've blessed each other. We're doing this thing." But statistically speaking, we know that after kids come because of these crazy recitals and such that we talked about earlier, like the satisfaction goes down, and that's when most couples see me. And I think that's really important that you said we addressed what was missing, which was our passion together. And that sounds simplistic, but it isn't. And as you said, we're going to find where the rut is. Like if you pursue your spouse and then there's something different, you're going to investigate that now differently. And I think that was so key because the type 6 personality in an unhealthy way, which I'm not saying anyone here is a 6, some of our listeners may be, but at any rate, we all can be any of the types in a certain moment. And when we're afraid, that's where 6 can be, is cowardly, afraid when they're not at their best. They tend to negatively chain, as you said, look for red flags everywhere. And oftentimes it's a self-fulfilling prophecy because of that, and it's so much push, "Are you okay? Are you cheating? Are you cheating?" That I'm gonna be honest, in my office, the type that gets cheated on the most is the 6. Um, I don't know why, maybe that's just who comes to see me about it, but that seems to be the one that does.
And what is the remind me what the 6 is?
The one who's more fearful,
Oh,
when they're
right.
at their best, they're the most courageous. They're the one who has, the firefighter or the person who's on the plane with everything in their purse. They're completely prepared. But because they negatively scan for trouble at all times and look for the red flags, oftentimes they're pushing in for love in ways that feel smothering, and their
Yeah,
spouse often cheats.
yeah.
And so when I'm working with a 6, of course, one of the first things I'm doing is helping them to be more like how you were before, a little bit lighter. What can happen after somebody's had infidelity is they can go into that 6 space and do that. And so you tried every iteration. I know because you're so humble and you're like, look, I'm going to try whatever works. But like you said, you got savvy, your girls got older, you began to learn EQ, and now you realize it's not that at all. It's showing love even when you're hurt. It's not being a doormat. You certainly had community and support and self-care going, but is that right that I'm hearing you say you still showed love even though it was really hard?
Oh, yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, I think, the more this isn't, you know, 100 people are gonna react to something like to infidelity in 100 different
right.
ways. And whether it goes, tracks back to their own childhoods, their own experience, their financial security, their everything. But for me, when I had so many good friends who walked with us through this
Yeah.
with so much good advice. Got a lot of bad advice too.
Yeah.
And you always do, but I got some great advice. And
Mm,
and sometimes the advice came in just observations. And one of my friends, I say this in the book,
yeah.
he's a therapist, and it's good to have therapists for friends because you
Yay.
get you get a little therapy Wikipedia whenever you're together.
Yeah.
And, he's a great guy. His name's Jimbo. James Bass
Mm,
Counseling is his group, but, he said, I was like, "You've seen people who've gone through this, right?" He's like, "Yep." I'm like, "So what do you see? Like, what do I do?" He
yeah.
said, "Well," he said, "the marriages that work, that reconcile," he goes, "the betrayed spouse always owns their part in what happened." It's like, "I'm not saying, like, you caused the affair, but
Yeah.
when you own your piece and what makes the marriage maybe not a fun place for somebody to be, you make space for your spouse to come back and to kind of
Mm,
reconnect with you."
yeah.
And that really changed a lot in my thinking. And having been, a writer for so long and writing literary nonfiction where characters have motivations, like, they don't just do things out of thin air. They might not know why they're doing it, but there is a reason they're doing everything. And so I started to look at my wife as a character. I'm like, "All right, she's done this terrible thing, and part of me wants to go burn all of her clothes in the yard."
Yes.
Feel very cathartic. I'd like to take a baseball bat and, hit her boyfriend a few times with it. I was like, "But there's gotta be a reason for this." And as I started to think, not like a reason like that would perfectly explain all the
Right.
mystery and terror away, because that's always gonna be there when the human heart is involved.
Yes.
But when I started to look at my wife like, "All right, she didn't do this to ruin my life.
Mm,
She she just didn't."
yeah.
Some people might have affairs for that reason, but most don't. Most think it will save their life.
Yeah.
And so I thought, "Well,
Mm,
what's she saving her life from
mm,
now? Is it me? Is it some future that is terrifying to her? What is it?" And when I started to ask these questions, like, this amazing, unsurprising thing happened. I started to feel empathy for this woman who had done this
mm,
terrible
mm.
thing. And I was like, "Well, I don't really like her right now, but I kind of am starting to understand where she's at."
Ah,
And of course, that changed dramatically once we reconciled and got back into therapy and all that. But just knowing it was much easier to love her even through the worst parts of this, because I saw her as a complete person who
yeah.
was not choosing to she didn't want to She wasn't setting out to destroy the children and to ruin my life. She thought this was a way out of something bad.
Mhm.
And maybe she was wrong in her thinking. Maybe she was cloudy in her thinking. Maybe she hadn't, maybe there was fear behind a lot of her decisions, but
Yeah.
she truly thought she was doing something that would be good to
Yes.
do.
Yes.
And so that helped me see her with a lot more empathy. And at the end of the day, even if when things got really bad, she was the mother of my children, and we would be in each other's lives forever. We
Mhm.
would be seeing each other at graduations and weddings
Yes.
and funerals and
Yes.
everything. And I'm like, why would I want, I mean, she's not my enemy.
Yeah.
This woman has to be an ally. Even if we get divorced, we have to be allies because we are still
Yes.
trying to
Yes.
raise these children and do this stuff. And so those ways of thinking helped me to love her more through this when even in the darkest hours.
Yes. And they took time and thought. And I can tell that, yes, there's processing with community and support, but your writing and just your thinking time in this is showing itself because that really speaks to you doing some deep processing and looking ahead with wisdom, which is really hard to do, frankly, in these moments. So I'm grateful you did that. It reminds me before we end, I'll just say briefly, of I just finished yesterday Dostoevsky's The Idiot, and it was something my late father had recommended on his best list of classics because that was his life. And it was really, as you were talking about your wife, I thought of Nastasia, the heroine of the story, the tragic heroine, and all of her complexity. And that's why my dad recommended the book. He's like, I like a woman with emotional range, and I really, I hear in it just a bit of her tale too, as you say, my wife thought she was good because Nastasia in the book keeps feeling like she is, by leaving with the villain, leaving a wonderful guy who has offered her his humble love. Uh, she is like, there's something in me that isn't good enough for you, and I don't want your compassionate, pitiful love.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but it's just like
Yeah.
reminded me of you guys.
Yeah, there's always it's so much more. I mean, when something like this happens, you feel like you've been stabbed in the heart by the person who is supposed to love you more than anyone else in the world. And it's very easy to see red when this happens. And I think anger is very healthy. And it's okay to see some red. You've
Yeah.
been in a way that,
Mhm.
Dante reserves the lowest level of hell for the betrayers.
Yeah. Mhm.
And Judas and others like him. So it is a great moral, spiritual, psychological crime to betray those you have promised to love. But
Mhm.
betrayal comes in many forms. And if we
Mhm.
really look at who we are and who we are in our marriages and who we are as parents and friends, we'll see traces of betrayal in some of our own actions. I feel pretty
Mhm.
strongly about. And if you can see that, then you can start to see a lot more mercy when you look at others who have betrayed you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we all have her in us. And Christ, or, if people share my faith, is more of the Prince Moishkin. So I love that you finished us with that. Like, this is the job of all of us, whatever the betrayals, because there will be betrayals in marriage after all these years, that we must look at ourselves and offer our spouse compassion, if we're going to do this marriage. And I love that you did. I love that you're still doing it. Look at all your celebrations you're having. Now everybody wants to read this book. So can you tell everybody where they can find it and find you?
Yeah, you can find the book anywhere books are found. You can Google it. It's on every, indie bookstore has it, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and it comes out in paperback. I don't know when this will air, but it comes out in paperback on June the 4th. And so it's been out for just about a year. You can find me all over social media, but probably best to find me on Instagram at Harrison Scott Key. Um, I have a very silly feed of memes and occasionally sentimental pictures of my family.
Yeah.
But mostly it's completely ridiculous, inappropriate memes 24/7. It is my drug. I love to share
Yeah.
memes with the world, but I'm there and I get a lot of messages there and interact with readers there.
Oh.
So yeah, would love to meet some of your awesome people. And you've inspired me to read your book and
Oh,
to find out. My wife and I think we need to read it together, and then I'm just going to email you and tell us what we have learned after we
yes.
do that.
Oh my gosh, I would love to. I would be honored. I just would love to help you in any way I can. You have blessed our audience so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story here.
Thank you, Krista. This has been great.
Oh, thank you so much for tuning in, you guys. I know that you were just as I was feeling all kinds of things as you walked through this time with us. And I hope that we made you feel safe enough to know that if you're pursuing your spouse, you're in a really good place and that no one's perfect. That marriage is really hard, but there are beautiful legacies at stake. And all of the processes we walked through last month, this month, and onward with our families, with our kids, with the sandwich generation of elders, with the people you're affecting at work. Everybody is better off when you're healthy. So keep doing your work, keep finding community. Grab this book in paperback. It is ready for you. Share it with those you know and love. And you are on the right track. I will see you on Wednesday for our Type 7 episode. Make sure you hit those show notes for everything Dr. Harrison Scott Key has for us. Okay, thanks. Bye.